You were never built to survive alone. Ryan Whitmore said it like a closing statement, calm and polished, as if the end of their marriage was not a wound but a business decision already approved by someone more important than her. The words hung in the underground parking garage beneath the county courthouse, where the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and reflected in pale streaks across the damp concrete. It had rained all morning in Chicago, the kind of cold, sideways rain that slipped beneath collars and made every breath feel borrowed. Emily Carter stood beside a gray support pillar with a cardboard box pressed against her coat. Inside were the last pieces of a life she had once believed was permanent. A framed wedding photo turned face down, a house key that no longer opened anything, and a folded navy scarf Ryan had given her during their first winter together, back when his voice still softened when he said her name. Now he stood 10 feet away beside his black Mercedes, one hand resting on the driver's door, his suit dry beneath the shelter of the garage, his expression almost bored. Behind the tinted passenger window, Lauren sat with her legs angled neatly, her phone glowing in her hand, watching Emily the way people watch rain hit glass. Ryan placed a white envelope on the hood of the car. 3 months, he said. That should be enough time for you to figure something out. He did not say it cruelly. That was what made it worse. Cruelty would have cracked somewhere. This was practiced, clean, delivered with the confidence of a man who believed money made him generous and leaving made him powerful. Emily looked at the envelope. She knew what was inside because his attorney had mentioned it twice upstairs, as if temporary support was mercy, as if 8 years of marriage could be reduced to 90 days of survival money and a signature drying on court paper. Ryan adjusted the silver watch on his wrist, the one she had helped him choose before his first executive dinner at Harrington and Vale. Come on, Emily, he said, lowering his voice as if he were being reasonable. You never liked pressure. You never liked making hard decisions. You were comfortable because I handled the real world. The elevator doors opened somewhere behind them, releasing a faint chime and the murmur of strangers who quickly walked past. Emily felt their eyes skim over her box, her wet hair, her empty left hand. She could have corrected him. She could have reminded him who stayed up past midnight rebuilding his first client pitch when he nearly lost the account. She could have told him how many bills she had paid quietly when his confidence was still bigger than his paycheck. She could have said that the real world had entered their home many times, and she had met it before breakfast, before makeup, before anyone applauded him. But she said nothing. Her silence made Ryan sigh, as if even that disappointed him. See, he said softly. This is what I mean. You freeze. You always freeze. Lauren's window lowered just enough for her perfume to drift into the cold garage air. Ryan, she said, careful and sweet. We're going to be late. Late. The word landed with strange precision. Late for lunch. Late for a meeting. Late for the new life he had already rehearsed without her. Ryan picked up the envelope and held it out. Emily stared at his hand. The same hand that once held hers crossing icy sidewalks. The same hand that slid divorce papers across a conference table without trembling. Slowly, she set the cardboard box on the ground. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her hair onto the concrete. She reached for her wedding ring, not because she wanted him to notice, but because she finally noticed its weight. The ring came off with a slight resistance, leaving a pale circle around her finger. Ryan's gaze flickered just once. Emily stepped forward, took the envelope from his hand, and placed it flat on the hood of the Mercedes. Then she set the ring on top of it. No speech, no accusation, no plea, just a small gold circle resting on white paper beneath the hard fluorescent light. Ryan looked at it, then at her, confused by the absence of collapse. Emily picked up her box and turned toward the garage exit. The rain outside looked endless, silver and cold, washing the city into blurred lines. She had no car waiting, no home that felt like hers, no one standing under an umbrella calling her back. Behind her, Ryan gave a short laugh, the kind men use when they are not sure they have won. You'll call me, he said. Emily kept walking. Each step echoed against the concrete, quiet but steady. By the time she reached the ramp, the rain had soaked through her coat, but her spine did not bend. And for the first time in 8 years, the future was terrifying, empty, and entirely hers. The first thing Emily learned after the courthouse was that silence had a sound. It sounded like rain tapping against a bus window while she sat with a cardboard box on her knees. watching downtown Chicago blur into gray glass and brake lights. It sounded like the small click of her apartment key turning in a lock Ryan had never touched. It sounded like the refrigerator humming in a kitchen too narrow for two people, the kind of kitchen where the counter ended before the coffee maker had a proper place to sit. She rented the apartment 3 days later above a dry cleaner on the north side, 600 square feet if she counted the hallway twice, with old radiators that knocked at night and a window that looked out over a brick wall painted with fading letters from a company that no longer existed. There was no guest room, no walk-in closet, no marble bathroom like the house she had left behind. But the first morning she woke there, she stood barefoot on the cold wood floor, made coffee in a chipped white mug, and realized no one in that room was disappointed in her. The quiet did not accuse her. The quiet waited. For 8 years, Emily had mistaken being needed for being loved. She had known Ryan before the tailored suits, before the corner office, before people at Harrington and Vale lowered their voices when he entered the room. Back then, he was a young account manager with too much confidence and not enough discipline, carrying a laptop bag with a broken zipper and dreams that sounded noble because they were still small. Emily had believed in him with the kind of faith that does not ask for receipts. She remembered sitting beside him at their second-hand dining table, sorting through pages of client research, while he paced the floor, practicing a presentation he had not finished. His numbers were wrong that night. His argument had holes. His closing slide was weak. She made tea, pulled her hair into a loose knot, and worked until almost 2 in the morning rebuilding the proposal line by line. The next week, he won the account. At dinner, surrounded by executives and silverware and soft yellow light, Ryan told the story as if he had done it alone. Emily smiled from the seat beside him and watched everyone raise their glasses. That became the rhythm of their marriage. She remembered birthdays forgotten because Ryan had a late meeting, vacations canceled because a senior partner wanted him in Boston by Monday, dinners going cold while she refreshed his flight status on her phone. She learned the names of his clients, the habits of his bosses, the weaknesses in his reports. She ironed shirts before important mornings and removed lint from his lapels before he stepped into rooms where no one asked who had helped him prepare. At first, he thanked her in small ways, a kiss on the forehead, a hand on her back, a whispered promise that one day everything would be for both of them. Then the gratitude thinned. Then it disappeared. By the time Ryan became vice president of operations, he had started introducing her as his wife with a smile that made her feel like furniture in a beautiful house. At company dinners, he called her quiet. At fundraisers, he said she was not really interested in business. At holiday parties, when someone asked what she did, Ryan answered for her before she could breathe. "Emily keeps me grounded," he would say, and the table would laugh warmly, as if that was a compliment. She learned to laugh too. She learned to hold her glass with both hands so no one would see her fingers tighten. She learned that a woman could vanish slowly while still standing in every photograph. The worst part was not that Ryan changed. It was that he began to believe the version of her he had created for other people. He forgot the late nights. He forgot the corrected numbers. He forgot the woman who had carried pieces of his ambition when his own hands were shaking. And as Emily sat alone in her small apartment, surrounded by boxes and the smell of fresh paint, she understood something colder than heartbreak. Ryan had not simply left her. He had edited her out of his story. That night, she opened her laptop on a folding table near the window and stared at her reflection in the dark screen. Her eyes were tired. Her hair was still damp from the rain. Her left hand looked strangely bare. For a long moment, she did nothing. Then she searched for entry-level corporate jobs within 20 miles of Chicago, opened a blank document, and began rebuilding her resume from memory. The resume looked smaller than Emily remembered, not because there was nothing on it, but because so much of what she had done had never been given a title. There was no clean line for keeping a marriage steady while another person chased promotions. No official position for turning panic into polished presentations. No bullet point for knowing when to speak, when to stay quiet, and when to make someone else look brilliant in a room that would never know her name. For 2 weeks, she revised the document every night at the folding table by the window, the glow of the laptop cutting a pale square across the dark apartment. She applied to assistant roles, coordinator roles, analyst trainee roles, anything with health insurance and a paycheck that could keep the rent paid. Most companies never answered. A few sent polite rejections before breakfast. One recruiter asked why there was such a long gap in her employment history, and Emily smiled through the phone as if the answer did not carry 8 years of unpaid labor. Then Harrington and Vale posted an opening for a junior operations coordinator. Emily stared at the listing for nearly an hour. It was not a glamorous job. It paid less than Ryan spent on one weekend trip with clients. But she knew that company better than half the people inside it. She knew the rhythm of its departments, the language of its quarterly reports, the names of executives who liked clean numbers and hated surprises. So she pressed submit. The interview invitation came 4 days later. On the morning of the interview, Emily woke before sunrise. She steamed her only navy dress in the bathroom while the radiator hissed beside the sink. She pinned her hair neatly, covered the tired shadows beneath her eyes, and took the train downtown with her portfolio held against her chest. Harrington and Vale rose above the street in blue glass and steel, 40 stories of polished confidence reflecting a sky the color of cold milk. Emily stood outside the revolving doors for a moment, remembering how many times she had entered that lobby as Ryan's wife, wearing a name tag printed by someone who never asked what she did. This time, she entered alone. The lobby smelled like espresso, leather, and expensive flowers. Her heels clicked softly across the marble floor as she checked in with security. For a brief second, she felt almost steady. Then she saw Ryan. He stepped out of an elevator with 2 men in gray suits and a woman from Human Resources holding a tablet. His laugh reached her first, smooth and familiar. When his eyes found her, the sound faded. Surprise crossed his face, then amusement, then something sharper. "Emily," he said, as if her name did not belong in the building without his beside it. She kept her voice even. "I have an interview." The woman from Human Resources glanced between them. Ryan looked down at the portfolio in Emily's hands and smiled with the quiet confidence of someone deciding how a scene would end. "For what position?" he asked. "Junior Operations Coordinator." One of the men beside him shifted his weight. The woman with the tablet lowered her eyes. Ryan gave a small laugh, not loud enough to be dramatic, just loud enough to make everyone uncomfortable. "That is a demanding department," he said. "Long hours. Pressure. Actual accountability." Emily felt heat rise in her face, but her hands stayed still around the portfolio. Ryan turned slightly toward the Human Resources woman, his tone gentle, almost apologetic. "I was married to her. Trust me, she is not built for corporate pressure." The sentence did not strike like a shout. It landed like a stamp on paper. Final. Administrative. Easy to file away. The woman from Human Resources gave Emily a practice smile, the kind meant to soften a door closing. "Maybe we should reschedule after we review a few internal details." Emily understood. No interview. No conversation. No chance to become anything other than the version of herself Ryan had just approved for them. She looked at him then, really looked. The tailored suit. The confident mouth. The man who had once asked her to read his emails before he sent them because he was afraid of sounding uncertain. For 1 second, Ryan seemed to expect anger, maybe pleading, maybe the kind of fragile response that would prove him right. Emily gave him none of it. She simply opened her portfolio, removed the printed copy of her resume, and placed it on the reception desk with careful fingers. "Please keep it on file," she said. Her voice was quiet enough that everyone had to listen. Then she turned and walked toward the elevators. Behind her, Ryan said nothing. Outside, the Chicago wind moved hard between the buildings, cutting through her coat as she stepped onto the sidewalk. She made it half a block before stopping beneath the awning of a closed restaurant. Her eyes burned, but no tears fell. Across the street, Harrington and Vale towered above her, its name carved in silver letters over the entrance. Emily looked up at it through the morning glare. She did not make a promise out loud. She did not need to. Some names were not meant to be forgotten. Some doors were not meant to stay closed forever. That afternoon outside Harrington and Vale did not become the worst day of Emily Carter's life. It became the day she stopped waiting for someone to hand her a smaller version of the future. She walked back to the train station with her resume still sitting on a reception desk 30 stories above her. And by the time the brown line carried her north, her shame had cooled into something quieter and harder to name. Not anger. Anger moved too fast. This was discipline beginning to take shape. At her apartment, she took off her navy dress, hung it carefully in the closet, and changed into jeans and a gray sweater with a loose thread at the cuff. Then she opened her laptop and made a list. Rent, utilities, groceries, phone bill, train pass, health insurance, minimum, payments. The numbers looked merciless in the blue light of the screen, but numbers had one kindness people often lacked. They did not laugh. They did not rewrite the past. They told the truth and waited for someone brave enough to answer. Emily found morning work at a coffee shop 6 blocks away, a narrow place with fogged windows, black tile floors, and regulars who ordered the same drinks before sunrise without looking up from their phones. She learned to steam milk, wipe counters, restock paper cups, and smile without giving away how little sleep she had. By 8 o'clock each morning, her hands smelled like espresso and cinnamon syrup. By 9, she was on a bus to a temp office downtown, where she entered invoices, cleaned spreadsheets, and answered phones for managers who forgot her name by lunch. She came home after sunset with sore feet and grocery bags looped around her wrists, then ate soup from a saucepan because washing one less bowl felt like a victory. At night, the apartment became a classroom. She signed up for online courses in corporate finance, operations management, and business analytics, paying in installments that made her stomach tighten every time the confirmation email arrived. She taped index cards to the wall above the folding table, not with inspirational quotes, but with instructions plain enough to obey when hope felt too expensive. Survive the month. Pay every bill. Learn one thing Ryan cannot take credit for. Some nights, she fell asleep with her cheek against an open textbook, waking to the radiator knocking like an impatient fist in the dark. Other nights, she stayed up past 2 in the morning listening to lectures through cheap headphones while snow gathered on the fire escape outside her window. Chicago winter pressed against the glass, white and silent, but Emily kept writing notes. She learned the language of balance sheets the way other people learned prayers. Revenue, margin, debt structure, cash flow, risk exposure. She began to see companies the way doctors might see a patient, not as logos or glass towers, but as systems with symptoms, habits, weaknesses, and hidden fractures. Every rejection became a file she refused to close. A logistics firm told her she lacked recent corporate experience. She took a free certification in supply chain fundamentals. A staffing agency said her skills were hard to categorize. She rebuilt her resume until every invisible year had weight. A hiring manager asked if she was comfortable starting at the bottom. Emily looked at her rent receipt, her bus pass, her cracked coffee mug, and almost smiled. She had already started lower than that. Months passed, then a year. Her apartment changed in small, almost private ways. The boxes disappeared. A second-hand bookshelf rose against the brick wall. A printer sat where the wedding photo had once been. The navy scarf from the cardboard box stayed folded in a drawer, not because she missed Ryan, but because throwing it away would have made him too important. On the wall above her desk, the first index card yellowed at the edges. Survive the month. Beneath it, she taped a new one after paying off the last overdue bill. Never begged to be chosen again. On the night she finished her final finance course, Emily stood by the window with a mug of coffee gone cold and looked down at the alley behind the dry cleaner. Nothing outside had changed. The dumpster was still there. The brick wall was still faded. The city still moved without caring whether she succeeded. But inside that small room, something had shifted with absolute quiet. She no longer felt like a woman trying to prove Ryan wrong. She felt like a woman becoming too busy to remember his voice. The first time Nathaniel Brooks noticed Emily Carter, she was not wearing a suit, speaking on a stage, or trying to impress anyone. She was sitting alone at the far end of the coffee shop after closing, one shoulder turned toward the rain-streaked window, a calculator beside her left hand, and a stack of printed reports spread across a table that still smelled faintly of espresso. The shop had gone quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerators and the soft hiss of the dishwasher in the back. Emily was off the clock, but she had stayed because the apartment felt too small for the size of what she was trying to become. Her apron was folded over the chair beside her. Her hair was tied back with a plain black band. On the table, under the yellow pendant light, was the financial summary of a small delivery company she had found through an online business case competition. The assignment asked participants to suggest ways to increase revenue. Emily had circled something else entirely: fuel waste, route overlap, overtime leakage, vendor contracts renewed without review. She was not looking for what sounded impressive. She was looking for where the bleeding had been hidden. Nathaniel had come in just before closing for black coffee. No sugar, no small talk. He was in his early 60s, tall, composed, wearing a charcoal overcoat that held the scent of cold air and expensive wool. Most customers barely looked at Emily unless their order was wrong, but Nathaniel paused when he saw the pages on her table. He did not interrupt at first. He stood near the counter, reading upside down with the stillness of a man who had spent years listening before speaking. "That company does not have a revenue problem," he said finally. Emily looked up, startled but not flustered. "No," she replied. "It has a discipline problem pretending to be a sales problem." A faint change moved across his face. Not a smile, exactly. Recognition. He walked closer and glanced at the red marks on her report. "You found that from the public summary?" The public summary was trying too hard to sound optimistic. Emily said, "When language gets polished around bad numbers, I look for what they are trying not to say." Nathaniel pulled out the chair across from her. "May I?" She hesitated only a second, then nodded. He sat with the careful posture of someone used to boardrooms, not corner tables sticky with spilled vanilla syrup. For 10 minutes, he asked questions. Not easy ones. He challenged her assumptions about labor costs, cash reserves, debt covenants, customer churn, and the difference between growth and vanity. Emily answered what she knew and admitted what she did not. That mattered more to him than confidence. He had met plenty of people who used certainty as decoration. Emily used silence as a tool. When she did not know something, she stopped, thought, and built the answer from the ground up. By the end, the coffee in Nathaniel's cup had gone cold. He turned one of the pages toward himself, tapped the margin where she had written one sentence in blue ink, and read it aloud. "The company is not failing because it is too small. It is failing because no one wants to confront the cost of its own habits." He looked at her then, directly. "Where did you train?" Emily almost laughed, but the sound would have come out too tired. "At a folding table, mostly after midnight." He studied her hands, the faint burn mark near her thumb from the milk steamer, the ink on her index finger, the plain silver watch she had bought at a discount store after selling the last bracelet Ryan had given her. "And before that?" he asked. The old instinct rose in her, the urge to make her history smaller so it would not make anyone uncomfortable. But she had outgrown that, slowly, painfully, one overdue bill at a time. "Before that," she said, "I helped someone else look prepared." Nathaniel did not ask who. That was the first kindness. He reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat and placed a cream-colored business card on the table. "Brooks Meridian Capital." The letters were simple, dark, and heavier than they looked. Emily recognized the name. Everyone in corporate finance did. The firm bought companies on the edge of collapse and rebuilt them with a patience that looked almost surgical. "I do not rescue people, Miss Carter," Nathaniel said. "I invest in discipline." Emily looked at the card but did not touch it yet. She had learned to distrust doors that opened too quickly. Nathaniel seemed to understand. "There is a trial analyst position opening next month. It is temporary. Low visibility. Long hours. Most people find it unglamorous." "That sounds honest," Emily said. This time he did smile, barely. "Send me your resume." After he left, the bell above the door gave one soft ring, and the coffee shop returned to its quiet. Emily sat alone beneath the yellow light, staring at the card on the table. Outside, rain moved down the window in thin silver lines. For years, she had been seen only as an attachment to someone else's ambition. That night, for the first time, a stranger had looked at the work in front of her and recognized the woman behind it. By the time Emily Carter walked through the glass doors of Brooks Meridian Capital, 2 full years had passed since the morning Harrington and Vale had refused to let her interview. She no longer lived above the dry cleaner. The old apartment had done its job, holding her through the season when survival still felt like a full-time occupation. But now she rented a quiet one-bedroom near Lincoln Park with enough sunlight to cross the floor by noon. She still owned the folding table. It sat in the corner of her office at home, not because she needed it, but because she respected what had happened there. At Brooks Meridian, respect was not given because someone looked polished. It was earned in conference rooms with no windows, through spreadsheets that had to survive questions from people paid to find weakness. Emily began as a temporary analyst with a badge that stopped working at 6 in the evening unless someone approved her overtime. She reviewed vendor contracts, mapped debt schedules, built operating models, and read so many failing company reports that she began to recognize distress by its shape before she reached the numbers. Some companies bled money through vanity, some through fear, some through leaders who confused motion with progress and volume with strategy. Nathaniel Brooks watched her without hovering. He never praised quickly. He would pass behind her chair, pause at a flagged page, and ask one question that turned a 10-hour model into a better one. Emily learned not to fear the silence after her answers. At Brooks Meridian, silence meant someone was thinking. It did not mean someone was leaving. The first company she helped restructure was a regional packaging supplier outside Indianapolis, a business with loyal workers, old machinery, and executives who had been rounding numbers upward for so long they had started believing the curve. Emily found the issue in a maintenance ledger no one wanted to read. The fix was not glamorous. Renegotiate leases. Close one warehouse. Reassign delivery zones. Protect payroll where possible. Stop. Pretending hope was a forecast. 3 months later, the company stabilized. Nathaniel placed the final report on her desk with one sentence written across the top in blue ink. Clear thinking under pressure. She read it once, then folded the page and placed it inside the top drawer beside the old cream-colored business card from the coffee shop. Promotions came slowly, then all at once. Temporary analyst became associate. Associate became senior restructuring lead. Her clothes changed, though never loudly. Navy blazers with clean lines. Ivory silk blouses. Low heels that could carry her across airports, manufacturing floors, and marble lobbies without complaint. She learned to travel with one carry-on suitcase and sleep 4 hours before a 7 o'clock meeting in Dallas. She learned that powerful people often revealed themselves not by what they said first, but by whose names they forgot in the room. And she never forgot names. Receptionists, plant supervisors, account managers, junior analysts sitting at the far end of the table with one good idea and no permission to speak. Emily listened to them because she remembered what it felt like to be present and unseen. On a Thursday evening in early November, long after most of the office lights had dimmed, her assistant, Grace, knocked softly on the open door. Urgent review from acquisitions, Grace said, placing a thick black folder on Emily's desk. Nathaniel wants your first read before tomorrow morning. Emily thanked her and waited until the hallway was quiet before opening it. The first page carried the standard acquisition summary, cleanly formatted, harmless at a glance. Then her eyes reached the company name, Harrington and Vale. For a moment, the city beyond the window seemed to lose sound. The traffic below Michigan Avenue continued moving, headlights threading through the dark, but Emily's attention had narrowed to 5 words printed in bold at the top of the file. The company was in worse condition than the market knew. Lost contracts, inflated projections, a leadership team divided by self-preservation, a confidential internal review attached near the back. Emily turned the pages with steady hands. Then she saw his name, Ryan Whitmore, Vice President of Operations. Under review for concealed delivery failures, unauthorized vendor commitments, and misreporting operational delays to senior leadership. Emily did not smile. She did not feel triumph rising bright and hot in her chest. What came instead was quieter, stranger, almost weightless. For years, Ryan had been a voice she had to outgrow. Now he was a line item in a company file. She sat back in her chair and looked at the name until it became ordinary. Ink on paper. Evidence in sequence. Consequence, not destiny. Nathaniel appeared in her doorway a few minutes later, his overcoat folded over one arm. "Can you handle the review?" he asked. Emily closed the folder, rested one hand on top of it, and met his eyes. "Yes," she said, but quietly. Nathaniel nodded, as if that was exactly the answer he expected. After he left, Emily took out a black pen and wrote 2 words on the upper corner of the acquisition memo. Proceed quietly. Then she turned back to the first page and began reading the company that had once closed its doors to her, as if she had all night, because she did. The invitation to Harrington and Vale arrived under a title so careful it almost sounded harmless. Strategic Transition Meeting. Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock. Executive Conference Room. Ryan Whitmore read it on his phone while standing in his kitchen, one hand around a mug of black coffee, the other scrolling through the list of attendees. Legal counsel. Interim board representatives. Senior operations. Acquisition committee. The name Brooks Meridian Capital appeared near the bottom, and with it, a small surge of relief moved through him. Investors meant money. Money meant time. Time meant the right performance could still save him. Across the Marble Island, Lauren asked whether everything was all right. Ryan gave her the smile he used before hard meetings, polished at the edges, empty in the center. New owners want to talk, he said. That is usually a good sign if you know how to manage a room. He spent the next 2 days preparing slides that made the damage look temporary. Lost contracts became market volatility. Failed delivery. Windows became regional disruptions. Vendor overcommitments became aggressive growth. He removed 3 charts, softened 2 timelines, and practiced explaining the internal review without ever using the word responsibility. By Monday night, he had convinced himself that the company did not need a confession. It needed confidence, and confidence had always been easy for him to wear. Tuesday came bright and cold over Chicago, the sky clean enough to make every glass building look sharper than it was. Ryan arrived early at Harrington and Vale in a charcoal suit, blue tie, and the same silver watch Emily had once helped him choose. The lobby had not changed much since the day she walked out with her rejected resume and quiet eyes. White marble, espresso bar, silver letters over the security desk. People moved through the revolving doors with winter coats over their arms and phones pressed to their ears, all of them pretending the company beneath their feet was not trembling. Ryan nodded to the receptionist, stepped into the elevator, and watched the floors rise in gold numbers. 23, 31, 40, 47. The executive conference room sat behind double glass doors at the end of a hallway lined with framed photographs of ribbon cuttings, warehouse openings, and smiling leaders who had promised growth in every season. Inside, the table was already set with water glasses, legal folders, tablets, and nameplates. Ryan took his seat halfway down the table, close enough to be seen, far enough to avoid being cornered. 2 board members whispered near the windows. The general counsel checked her watch. A representative from finance stared at a report without turning the page. The room carried the atmosphere of an airport before a delayed flight, polite faces hiding private calculations. Ryan opened his laptop and arranged his expression into calm concern. He was good at this part. He knew how to speak first, how to sound reasonable, how to make other people feel that doubt was their own weakness. At 9 o'clock exactly, the glass doors opened. Nathaniel Brooks entered first, gray-haired, composed, unreadable in a dark overcoat. Ryan stood halfway, ready, with the practiced warmth of a man meeting the person he hoped to impress. Then Nathaniel stepped aside. Emily Carter walked in behind him. For 1 second, Ryan did not understand what he was seeing. The mind can reject an image when the image threatens the story it has survived on. Emily was not in the navy dress from that failed interview. She was not wet from the rain, not holding a cardboard box, not standing outside a door waiting to be judged. She wore an ivory suit with clean lines, a pale blouse, and low heels that made no apology as they crossed the carpet. Her hair was swept back at the nape of her neck. In her hand was a slim brown leather folder. No dramatic jewelry, no visible triumph. Just composure so complete that it changed the temperature of the room. Ryan's mouth opened before he had decided what to say. Emily. Several heads turned toward him. Emily did not answer immediately. She walked to the head of the table, placed the folder beside the central nameplate, and set her phone face down with quiet precision. The nameplate read Emily Carter, Brooks Meridian Capital. Ryan felt the first real crack move through his confidence. He covered it with a laugh too light for the room. This is a private executive meeting, he said. Emily pulled out the chair and sat as if she had been expected there her entire life. She looked at him then, not coldly, not warmly, but with the calm attention of someone reviewing a number that no longer surprised her. I know, she said. Nathaniel remained standing behind the chair to her right. The general counsel closed her folder. The finance representative lowered his eyes. Ryan looked around, searching for someone who might share his confusion, but every face in the room had already adjusted to the truth before he had. Emily opened the leather folder. The sound of paper moving was soft, almost gentle. Good morning, she said to the room. Let us begin with operations. And in that moment, Ryan understood that the meeting he had entered to save himself had begun without needing his permission. Emily did not raise her voice when she began. That was the first thing Ryan noticed, and somehow it made the room feel smaller. She spoke the way numbers spoke when they were no longer willing to be dressed up. Brooks Meridian Capital has completed its controlling acquisition of Harrington and Vale effective as of 6 o'clock this morning, she said. This meeting is the first step in operational stabilization. The General Counsel slid a document across the table. Board members opened their folders. The finance representative turned his tablet toward the screen. Ryan sat very still, feeling each word arrive too late to stop. Controlling acquisition. Stabilization. Effective this morning. He looked at Nathaniel Brooks, expecting the older man to take over, to clarify, to put Emily back into some smaller role his mind could understand. Nathaniel only sat beside her and folded his hands. Emily continued. For the next 90 days, all executive functions will be reviewed under transition authority. No department head is exempt. Ryan forced a measured breath and leaned forward. I think we should be careful here, he said, shaping his tone into concern. This company is already under pressure. Publicly disruptive leadership changes could damage confidence even further. A few years earlier, that sentence would have moved people. It sounded mature. It sounded strategic. It sounded like the kind of warning powerful men used when they wanted accountability postponed. Emily looked down at the first page in her folder. Confidence is not the same as concealment. The words were quiet, but they landed cleanly. Ryan's jaw tightened. With respect, Emily, you have not been inside this company long enough to understand the operational complexity. The room went still in that particular way rooms do when everyone hears the mistake before the person who made it does. Emily did not correct the disrespect in his use of her first name. She only pressed a small remote, and the screen behind her lit up with a timeline of missed deliveries, altered internal reports, delayed vendor disclosures, and client complaints marked in red. 3 distribution centers reported capacity warnings in March, she said. Those warnings were reclassified as temporary routing noise. In April, 2 major accounts requested remediation plans. Those requests were not escalated to the board. In May, vendor commitments exceeded approved limits by $12.7 million. In June, projected recovery was reported without verified carrier agreements. She paused and turned one page. Your signature appears on all 4 summaries. Ryan felt heat climb under his collar, but he smiled as if disappointment, not fear, had reached him. Those decisions were made in context. Every executive in this room understands that operations involves trade-offs. Emily nodded once. Yes, trade-offs are documented. These were not. The finance representative lowered his eyes. One board member removed his glasses. Across the table, the general counsel folded her hands around a pen and did not look at Ryan at all. He understood then that they already knew. The meeting was not an investigation. It was a conclusion being read aloud. He shifted tactics. This is personal, he said, letting just enough hurt enter his voice to make it sound human. Given our history, I think the board should consider whether your position here creates a conflict. Emily looked at him fully for the first time since the presentation began. Not with anger. Not with embarrassment. With something far worse for him, distance. Our history is not on the agenda, she said. Your record is. Nathaniel's expression did not change, but the silence around him hardened. Emily opened the final section of the folder. The internal review began before Brooks Meridian submitted its acquisition offer. The recommendation from Harrington and Vale's own compliance team was termination for cause, pending board approval. Brooks Meridian did not create that recommendation. We inherited it. Ryan's fingers pressed against the edge of the table. He glanced toward the board members, then toward legal counsel, searching for one face still available to him. There were none. For years, he had filled rooms by speaking first, by making uncertainty look like disloyalty, by deciding which version of events would be easiest for others to accept. But now the room had documents, dates, signatures, patterns, the kind of truth that did not need volume. Emily placed one page in front of him. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your position as Vice President of Operations. Your access credentials will be suspended by noon. Human Resources and Legal Counsel will walk you through the transition. Ryan stared at the page as if it had been written in a language he had never learned. So this is what you wanted? He asked, his voice lower now. To sit there and fire me? Emily closed her folder. The soft click sounded final. I did not fire you, Ryan. Your record did. No one moved. Outside the glass wall, Chicago glittered in the morning sun, indifferent and bright. Ryan looked at Emily then, really looked, perhaps for the first time without the old filter of ownership. She was not the woman holding a cardboard box in a parking garage. She was not the wife smiling quietly beside him at dinners where he took credit for work she had helped shape. She was not waiting for him to define the room. She had become the room's center without asking his permission. When the general counsel stood and invited him to step outside, Ryan rose slowly. His chair made a soft scrape against the carpet. Emily had already turned to the next page in the stabilization plan. By the time he reached the glass doors, she was speaking to the board about vendor renegotiations, payroll protection, and rebuilding client trust. Not about him. That was what broke the last illusion. He had imagined himself as the reason she returned. But Emily Carter had not come back to destroy his life. She had come back to repair a company, and he was simply one of the things that could not be saved. Ryan did not leave through the executive elevator at first. For several seconds after the glass doors closed behind him, he stood in the hallway with the termination folder in his hand, staring at the framed photographs along the wall as if one of them might still remember him kindly. There he was in two of them, shaking hands at a warehouse opening outside Milwaukee, smiling beside a ribbon in Cincinnati, his name once spoken with confidence in rooms where people now avoided his eyes. The general counsel stood a few feet away, professional and silent. A human resources director explained the transition steps in a careful voice. Security access, company phone, laptop return, final documentation. Every phrase was clean, administrative, almost gentle. That made it worse. No one shouted. No one humiliated him. No one gave him an enemy large enough to hide behind. By noon, his badge no longer opened the doors he had once walked through without thinking. Downstairs in the lobby, the espresso machine hissed behind the cafe counter. Employees moved past in small groups, pretending not to look. Ryan saw his reflection in the polished marble near the security desk, charcoal suit, blue tie, silver watch, face pale beneath the bright lobby lights. For the first time in years, the building did not seem to belong to him at all. It had never belonged to him. He was almost at the revolving doors when he saw Emily at the base of the marble staircase, speaking quietly with Nathaniel Brooks and two members of the transition team. She was not celebrating. She was not glowing with revenge. She was listening to a facilities manager describe warehouse staffing concerns, taking notes on a small cream-colored pad, asking about payroll timing before asking about executive costs. That detail struck him with a strange force. Even now, with every right to savor the moment, she was working. Nathaniel stepped away, and for a breath, Emily stood alone. Ryan crossed the lobby before he could decide whether pride or panic was moving his feet. "Emily," he said. She turned. There was no surprise in her face, only patience measured in seconds. Up close, he could see the woman he remembered and not the woman he had invented. The same gray-blue eyes, the same calm mouth. But something essential had changed in the space around her. She no longer leaned toward approval. She no longer waited to be interrupted. Ryan held the folder at his side. Was all of this because of me? The question came out softer than he intended. It carried none of the authority he had practiced for boardrooms. It sounded almost young. Emily looked past him for a moment, toward the glass entrance where winter sunlight spilled across the floor. Then she looked back. "No," she said. One word, steady enough to end a decade. Ryan blinked as if he had expected an accusation and did not know what to do with peace. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked. "You bought the company where I worked. You sat in that room. You signed off on my termination." "The company was failing before I arrived," Emily said. "The review began before the acquisition. Your choices were documented before my name was on the door." He looked down at the folder, then at her. "So I was just a file to you?" Emily's expression softened, but not in the way he wanted. It was not forgiveness arriving to comfort him. It was distance without cruelty. "No, you were once my husband. Then you became a lesson. And eventually, you became irrelevant to the life I was building." The lobby seemed to quiet around them, though no one had stopped moving. Ryan's hand tightened around the folder. "I told myself you would call," he said, almost to himself. Emily remembered the parking garage, the envelope on the hood of the Mercedes, the ring resting on white paper beneath fluorescent light. She remembered the rain soaking through her coat as she walked toward a future that had no shape. She remembered every night at the folding table, every overdue bill, every rejected application, every index card taped to the wall like a commandment. None of it asked to be avenged now. It had already become something better than revenge. It had become hers. "I know," she said. "That was the last mistake you made about me." For a moment, Ryan looked as if he might argue, but there was no room left inside the truth for him to rearrange. The revolving doors turned behind him. Outside, a black car waited at the curb. Not his company car, not anymore. Emily's assistant approached with a tablet and paused at a respectful distance. "The warehouse call is ready," she said. Emily nodded, then looked at Ryan one final time. "I hope you rebuild honestly," she said. Not warmly, not bitterly, simply. Then she walked past him toward the elevators, her heels quiet against the marble, her name reflected in the polished brass directory near the wall. Emily Carter, interim chair of restructuring. Ryan stood beneath it long enough to understand that she had not taken his place. She had entered a world he once used to keep her outside, and she had made it larger by refusing to become what wounded her. Upstairs, the conference room waited. Contracts waited. Employees waited. A company needed saving from the habits of men who had mistaken confidence for character. Emily stepped into the elevator with her folder held close, and as the doors began to close, the lobby opened in front of her like a memory she no longer lived inside. Years ago, she had walked out of a parking garage in the rain with no car, no certainty, and no one calling her brave. Now sunlight poured through 40 feet of glass, bright across the marble, bright across her hands, bright across the empty place where her ring had once been. She did not win him back. She won herself.